So picture this right. You sit down at your desk, you clear away like 3 empty coffee
Oh,
mugs.
yeah, we've all been there.
Right. You set your timer for whatever, 45 minutes, and you pull up this completely blank document.
The perfect optimal conditions.
Exactly. The conditions are optimal. You've got the noise-canceling headphones on. Basically, you have engineered your entire environment for just absolute productivity.
And you're ready to just crush it.
Yeah. But then, within maybe, 3, possibly 4 seconds, you find yourself just staring at that blinking cursor.
Totally paralyzed.
Completely paralyzed by this sudden, intense spike of adrenaline about, like, a mildly awkward conversation you had in a grocery store checkout line 3 weeks ago.
Right, that is so true. Or you get that feeling, right?
The itch.
Yeah, that overwhelming, almost like phantom limb sensation in your hand. This biological imperative to just pick up your phone and check a notification that doesn't even exist.
I mean, we really do expect our brains to just snap into focus like, I don't know, a complex piece of machinery powering on.
Right, like flipping a switch.
Like a clean binary
Yeah.
shift from off to on. But there's this ancient text that warns us that expecting this kind of mechanical stillness isn't just frustrating, it's actually an impossible demand.
Yeah, and I mean, that expectation of the machine is really where the suffering begins.
How so?
Well, we've kind of imported the logic of the Industrial Revolution right into the biology of the human nervous system. We assume that the spreadsheet of our consciousness should have perfectly aligned rows and columns.
But it doesn't.
Not at all. When you look at the actual lived phenomenology of trying to quiet your mind, or even just trying to, I don't know, parse a complex quarterly report without opening a new tab.
Oh, that's the worst. Just one more tab.
Right. The landscape is incredibly murky, because the moment you issue the command for stillness, the internal environment just actively rebels.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that rebellion is exactly our central mission for this deep dive today.
I love that we're digging into this.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So if you're joining us, welcome to the deep dive. Yesterday, we spent time exploring this really beautiful, almost poetic concept of shanai.
Yes, the gradual quieting.
Right, the gradual step-by-step quieting of the mind. And it paints this picture of a slow, elegant descent into calm.
Which sounds lovely in theory.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
But the lived reality, as you just said, is that the mind doesn't usually just, nod in agreement and walk gracefully down those steps.
No, it kicks and screams.
It actively looks for the fire exit. So today we are taking the logical next step. We're looking at verses 26 and 27 of a remarkably dense, ancient spiritual text to deconstruct the precise mechanics of what happens when the mind rejects that quiet.
And critically, how this text offers a solution that completely bypasses that white-knuckled frustration we usually rely on.
Exactly. So to understand the solution, we kind of first have to examine how this text establishes the baseline reality of human cognition. Right?
Yeah, it requires a complete teardown of the foundational assumptions that modern professionals basically carry into their workspaces every single day.
So we're looking specifically at shloka 6.26.
Right. And the text utilizes 2 highly specific Sanskrit terms to diagnose the default state of the mind. The first one is chanchalam,
Chanchalam. Okay.
which translates as basically restless or kinetic. And the second is astaram, meaning unsteady or, lacking a fixed mooring.
Okay, let's pull those apart for a second, because to me they feel like they are describing 2 very different vectors of distraction. Like restless and unsteady aren't exactly the same thing.
They absolutely are different. So chanchalam refers to the inherent energetic quality. Etymologically, it's often compared to the wind or like a flickering flame.
Okay, so it has movement.
Yeah, it possesses this kinetic imperative. It must move. The mind is essentially a highly calibrated scanning mechanism.
Like radar.
Exactly like radar. Because from an evolutionary perspective, think about it. A mind that locks onto a single data point and just ignores the shifting environment around it.
That's a mind that gets eaten by a tiger.
Exactly. It gets its host killed by a predator. So chanchalam is the biological imperative to constantly scan for novelty, for threats, and for resources.
Which totally explains the phantom itch to check the phone. Like,
Yeah.
the notification is basically the modern equivalent of the rustling bush. The brain is just doing its job by investigating the rustle.
Precisely. That is the chanchalam aspect in action. Now, the astaram aspect, the unsteadiness, that refers to the lack of a structural anchor.
So even if it finds
Look,
something.
even when the mind finds a subject, it struggles to maintain a gravitational pull toward it. It drifts.
It just floats away.
Exactly. But what's fascinating here is that the most radical part of shloka 6.26 isn't just the diagnostic terminology, It's actually the phrasing that surrounds it.
The Sanskrit uses the phrase yato yato, right?
Yes, yato yato, which basically translates to wherever. The text does not say, oh, in the unfortunate event that the mind
Like
wanders.
some rare accident?
Right. It states it as an immutable law of physics.
Hmm.
Wherever the restless and unsteady mind wanders, it basically guarantees the departure.
I have to say, I found reading that in the source material to be just a profound relief.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because if you consume literally any modern optimization content today, the underlying premise is that a wandering mind is basically a software bug.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
It's viewed as a defect.
Right. The messaging implies that if you just optimize your neurochemistry with the right supplements,
Like your omega-3s.
right, take your pills,
Mm-hmm.
subject yourself to enough cold exposure, and if you structure your time blocks perfectly, you will achieve this unbroken laser beam flow state.
A mythical flow state.
Yeah, it treats the departure of attention as a personal failure to optimize.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about it like this. It's kind of like trying to force the mind to stay perfectly still is like trying to hold a handful of dry sand.
That's a great analogy.
Like the tighter you squeeze your fist to trap it, the faster it just slips right through your fingers.
Yeah, it just accelerates the loss. And what's fascinating here is that this ancient text is stepping in and declaring that the wandering isn't a glitch in the system. The wandering is the operating system.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. It is the default mode. I mean, in cognitive neuroscience, we literally call this the default mode network.
Wait, really? That's the actual term?
Yeah, the DMN. It's this network of interconnected brain regions that become highly active when we are not focused on the outside world.
So when we're just zoning out.
Right. It's responsible for daydreaming, retrieving memories, envisioning the future. And this ancient text identified this exact mechanism thousands of years ago.
That is wild.
It outright declares that expecting a mind that never wanders is just an impossible demand for a human being embedded in a material world.
Okay, so if we accept that, if we accept the engineering reality of Chanchalaman Astiram, the restlessness and the unsteadiness, it really forces a confrontation with the hidden expectations we bring into our daily tasks.
Oh, absolutely. The friction is all in the expectation.
Because if the system is designed to wander, why does it trigger such a catastrophic internal crisis every time we catch ourselves thinking about, like, what's for lunch during a Zoom meeting?
When we suffer from this severe miscalibration between intention and execution, the source material highlights this friction perfectly.
Walk me through it.
Okay, so we make a conscious prefrontal commitment to a task. We write it in the fancy planner. We block out the calendar.
We color code it.
Exactly. And then we confuse the crystalline clarity of that intention with the incredibly messy biological reality of the execution.
Like, we assume the planning is the doing.
We assume that because the decision to focus was frictionless, the actual act of focusing should be a smooth glide.
Yeah, it's like a commitment fallacy. We assume signing the contract is the same thing as the back-breaking labor of building the house.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And the text lays out a sequence that maps perfectly onto this modern problem. So step 1, we initiate the task. Step 2, we project that expectation of a frictionless glide. We basically expect immediate stillness.
Which we know is impossible.
Right. So then step 3 happens. The Changelam mind does exactly what it was built to do. It races.
It boots up the default mode network.
It pulls up an anxiety about an upcoming deadline. It replays some social slight from yesterday, or it just hunts for the dopamine release of checking a text.
And you see, the sequence up to that point is entirely neutral.
Really? Neutral?
Yeah, it is simply biology executing its programming. The actual damage occurs in the transition to step 4.
Ah, step 4. That is where the narrative turns toxic.
Very toxic.
Because we expected the frictionless glide, that natural biological drift is suddenly interpreted as this massive moral failing.
We take it so personally.
We do. We sit at the desk and the internal monologue just spirals. We think, I can't even hold my attention for 5 minutes. I have no discipline. My brain is fundamentally broken.
We basically assign a label of fundamental inadequacy to ourselves.
So what does this all mean? Like, for you listening to this, think about the psychological burden of that self-labeling.
It cannot be overstated. You are taking a momentary, 10-second lapse in attention?
A tiny blip.
And you're weaponizing it into this sweeping indictment of your entire character.
Yeah.
The cognitive load required to process all that self-loathing is immensely higher than the cognitive load of the original distraction.
Yeah, it's the primary event versus the secondary reaction.
Right.
The initial distraction, thinking about that grocery store conversation, it pulls me away from my quarterly report for maybe 30 seconds. It's a minor detour.
Insignificant in the grand scheme.
The secondary reaction, the meta emotion of being furiously angry at myself for taking that detour, that triggers a physiological stress response.
Your body thinks you're under attack.
Exactly. My heart rate elevates, my jaw clenches, I get this huge rush of cortisol. So I have now transformed a totally harmless, temporary wander into a full-blown crisis of confidence that completely derails my entire morning.
You're no longer just distracted.
No, I am actively hostile toward my own cognition.
And you've introduced severe turbulence into the exact system you are desperately attempting to calm.
It's so counterproductive.
It really is. And this brings us to this massive paradigm shift offered by the text.
I love this part.
Because the conventional modern understanding of self-discipline, or yoga, is basically the maintenance of an unbroken fortress of concentration.
Like guarding the walls.
Right. We believe success is keeping the walls perfectly intact. But the text completely dismantles this. It posits that the true goal, the actual essence of the practice, is not the unbroken focus.
Okay, wait.
The goal is the recovery.
I really want to let that breathe for a second because that completely redefines the metric of success in our daily lives.
It flips it upside down.
The goal is not the absence of wandering. The goal is the act of returning.
Think about it. If the metric of success is unbroken focus, and we have already established that the mind is fundamentally chanchalam, restless, right? Then you have architected a system where daily guaranteed failure is literally the only possible outcome.
You're fighting gravity.
You are. But if the practice is the recovery itself, then every single time the fortress is breached, it is not a failure. It is actually the necessary condition for the practice to occur.
Wow. Okay, but the question then becomes the mechanics of that recovery. Because just recognizing that I need to recover my focus doesn't magically stop the spiral of guilt, right?
No, awareness isn't always enough to stop the emotion.
Right. If I'm already angry at my brain for wandering, simply knowing I need to get back to the report doesn't remove the hostility I'm feeling.
Exactly. And the text offers a very specific framework for this, and it centers around this beautiful metaphor of an epic tale.
Let's get into the metaphor because it's a remarkable pedagogical tool.
It really is. The text asks us to imagine reading a text as sweeping, complex, and philosophically dense as the Mahabharata.
Which is huge.
Massive. It's the pinnacle of narrative weight. It deals with the cosmos, morality, war, the ultimate duties of the soul.
Heavy stuff.
And the metaphor says, imagine you are sitting there, attempting to impart this staggering wisdom to a toddler.
A toddler. Okay, and the toddler, predictably, completely ignores the cosmos and becomes entirely captivated by, like, a piece of foil shining on the floor.
Or a dust mote floating in the sunbeam.
Right.
And their limbic system is prioritizing immediate sensory novelty over abstract philosophical narrative.
As they're a toddler.
Exactly. It's functioning exactly as a developing brain should.
Now, I have to be honest and challenge this analogy a bit.
Go for it.
When I first read this in the source material, my immediate reaction was just pure resistance.
Why is that?
Because it feels inherently condescending. Like, I am an adult professional. I manage complex projects. I have a mortgage. I navigate really nuanced social dynamics.
You're a serious adult.
I am. So to suggest that I should treat my own cognitive processes with the same patronizing tone I would use for a toddler who is distracted by a shiny wrapper, it feels like an insult to my agency. It feels like I'm just letting myself off the hook way too easily.
Let's interrogate that resistance, though, because it is incredibly common, and it's highly revealing of our modern biases.
Okay, listening.
We tend to equate adulthood with the total dominance of the prefrontal cortex. That's the logical, planning, executive center of the brain.
The rational part.
Right. But the urge to check a notification, the sudden spike of anxiety over a past memory, the intense craving for a distraction, those do not originate in the prefrontal cortex.
Where do they come from?
They originate in the limbic system, which is the older, much more primal emotional center of the brain. So neurologically speaking, when you are hijacked by a distraction, you basically are dealing with the developmental equivalent of a toddler.
Wow. Okay.
The analogy isn't condescending at all. It is anatomically precise.
Here's where it gets really interesting because that shifts the entire framework for me.
How so?
Well, if the distraction is originating in the limbic system, then fighting it with the prefrontal cortex's tool of harsh judgment is a total mismatch of resources.
Exactly. You're using the wrong tool.
Like if a toddler looks away from the book to stare at the foil on the floor. No rational adult slams the book shut, screams at the child, and calls them a failure who lacks discipline.
I mean, doing that would only trigger the child's amygdala, cause a massive tantrum, and completely destroy any chance of ever returning to the story.
Right, you'd ruin the whole session.
So instead, the parent utilizes what we can call tender discipline. You understand that the distraction is not malicious. It isn't an insult to you or to the narrative.
It's just a shiny thing.
Right. So you gently, without any spike in your own emotional reactivity, redirect the child's attention back to the page.
You just point to the book and say, like, look at what the hero's doing now.
Exactly.
And when they look away again 2 minutes later, you don't escalate to anger. You just repeat the gentle redirection.
Over and over.
And the realization here is that applying that tender discipline to our own internal distractions is genuinely revolutionary.
It changes everything.
Because normally we treat our own passing thoughts as invading armies that must be crushed with extreme prejudice.
We go to war with our own minds.
But the text proposes we treat them as wandering children.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the word discipline in our modern lexicon has really been co-opted.
Yeah, it implies punishment.
Punishment, rigidity, the application of brute force. But tender discipline reclaims the word's actual root, which is about guidance and instruction.
You're still maintaining boundaries.
Exactly. You are not letting the child wander to the street. You are still fully committed to finishing the epic tale. But the mechanism of enforcement is compassion rather than hostility.
And that has profound physiological implications, right? When I attack my own distraction with hostility, when I yell at myself internally, I am artificially inducing a fight or flight response.
You're flooding your system with stress hormones.
I am flooding my system with the exact neurochemicals that make sustained, calm focus biologically impossible.
Cortisol and adrenaline.
Yeah. But by adopting the posture of tender discipline, the body remains downregulated. The water stays calm even as you steer the boat.
Which brings us to the actual tactical implementation of this whole philosophy.
Yeah.
Because the source material transitions from this beautiful metaphor of the child to a concrete moment-to-moment practice for your daily life.
So how do we actually do it?
The methodology is essentially a sophisticated catch-and-release program.
Okay, let's map out the mechanics of the catch. Say I am reading a complex brief for work. My eyes are scanning the words, but my consciousness has drifted completely to drafting a sarcastic response to an email I received like 3 hours ago.
A classic scenario.
Right. The text instructs that the exact moment I become aware of this drift, I must execute the catch.
Yes. The catch is that spark of metacognition. It's you thinking about your own thinking.
Okay.
But the critical intervention is the vocalization or the internal framing that immediately follows the catch. The text suggests utilizing a very specific phrase.
What's the phrase?
You do not analyze the distraction. You do not judge it. You simply observe it and state, it has wandered again. And then you gently guide it back.
Ugh, it has wandered again. You know, I have been testing this in my own workflow this week, and it operates as a definitive cognitive circuit breaker.
Let's test that out. Break down the phenomenology of that exact moment. What is actually happening in your consciousness when you deploy that phrase versus your normal reaction?
Well, normally the realization of distraction triggers this cascade of aggressive self-talk. Like, what are you doing? Stop wasting time. Focus.
It's very aggressive.
It's heavy, it's urgent, and it's deeply personalized. The distraction becomes a reflection of my core deficit.
Right.
But when I use the phrase from the text, the inclusion of the word is doing immense heavy lifting. Yeah. Is not the sound of anger. It is the sound of mild amusement.
There it goes.
Exactly. It is the sound of recognition. It completely neutralizes the threat response before it can even formulate in my body.
In psychological terms, you are engaging in affect labeling.
Affect labeling.
Yes. By simply naming the phenomenon without attaching any kind of moral valence to it, you are actively down-regulating the amygdala and you're recruiting the prefrontal cortex again.
So I'm turning the toddler back over to the adult.
Exactly. You are transforming a subjective emotional failure into an objective, observable event.
It creates this really powerful structural distance between me and the distraction. Like the phrase doesn't say, I have wandered. It says, it has wandered.
And this touches on the deepest philosophical architecture of shloka 6.26.
The self alone, right?
The verse instructs the practitioner to bring the mind continually back under the control of the self alone. This method of catch and release perfectly operationalizes the duality between the mind and the self.
Because we generally operate under this totally unquestioned assumption that we are our minds.
We think we are the thoughts.
Right, the voice in the head is who I am.
But if you are entirely identified with the mind, then the mind's chanchalam nature, its relentless restlessness, means that you are inherently flawed.
Because I can't sit still.
Right. But the text establishes a very distinct separation. The mind is the mechanism. It is the radar scanning the environment. It is the toddler.
And the self.
The self is the observer. The self is the pure consciousness that possesses the capacity to notice the radar spinning out of control in the first place.
So when I say, it has wandered again, I am actively stepping out of the stream of the restless mind, and I'm taking a seat on the riverbank as the self.
That's exactly it.
I am no longer the chaotic weather system. I am the sky observing the storm pass through.
Beautifully said.
And the anxiety, the craving, the distraction, they aren't personal failings anymore. They are just meteorological events occurring within the biological hardware.
You are reclaiming the reins of control, but critically, not through the application of brute force. You achieve control through the cultivation of detached, loving awareness.
And a discipline.
Every single time you notice the departure, step back into the identity of the self and gently guide the focus back. You are physically altering the neural pathways in your brain.
See, this fundamentally alters the calculus of what a productive day even looks like.
It really does.
Because if the victory is no longer measured by the duration of unbroken focus, but by the frequency of the return, then a highly distracted day is no longer a failure at all.
Let's consider a highly practical scenario. Say you dedicate 45 minutes to deep work on a project.
Okay.
During that window, the mind fractures 50 times.
Very realistic.
It loops back to the grocery store argument. It desperately craves a snack. It worries about a fluctuating bank balance. 50 distinct departures.
Sounds exhausting.
But utilizing tender discipline, you execute 50 catches. You say, it has wandered again, and you shepherd the attention back to the work 50 times.
Now, under the modern productivity framework, that 45 minutes is categorized as an unmitigated disaster.
A total waste of time.
You were fractured. You failed to achieve the mythical flow state.
But under the framework of this ancient text,
You just executed 50 successful repetitions of yoga. You succeeded 50 times. The victory is the return.
this raises an important question about how we visualize practice. And this is where we need a better analogy than the typical reps at the gym comparison.
Why doesn't the gym analogy work?
Because doing reps at the gym implies a kind of muscular exhaustion. It implies fatigue. Think of this more like training a machine learning model, specifically a neural network.
Oh, the algorithm analogy. I like where this is going.
So in machine learning, a model learns through a process called backpropagation.
Backpropagation.
Right. The system makes a prediction, it compares that prediction to the actual data, and it calculates the error rate.
How far off it was.
Exactly. It then propagates that error back through the network to adjust the internal weights and biases. Now here's the key. The learning does not happen when the system is perfectly accurate.
Really?
No. The learning only occurs when there is an error and the system calculates the correction.
Oh, wow. So the wandering mind is the error rate.
Exactly. The departure into distraction is the exact necessary data the system needs to calculate the adjustment.
That is mind-blowing.
Every single time you gently execute the return, every time you say, it has wandered again, you are adjusting the algorithmic weights of your own attention. If the mind never wandered, you could literally never train the network.
So the repetitive, quiet labor of calculating the error and adjusting the weight is the highest form of discipline.
Yes.
We hold up this idol of the tortured genius, right? Like locking themselves in a remote cabin for 10 hours of unbroken manic output, and we call that the pinnacle of focus.
Which is largely a myth anyway.
Right. But the text suggests that the true master is the person sitting quietly in a totally noisy, chaotic environment, gently executing the backpropagation algorithm 1,000 times a day without a shred of frustration.
It completely democratizes the practice.
You don't need a silent retreat in the mountains to achieve this?
Not at all. A stressful commute, a chaotic open-plan office, a noisy household with kids running around.
These are simply environments with higher data yields.
Yes. They offer more opportunities to adjust the weights.
That is so empowering. Okay, but this brings us to the ultimate trajectory of the text.
The destination.
Right. If you listening are willing to accept the reality of the wandering mind, and if you adopt the tender discipline of the parent, and if you commit to this quiet algorithmic labor of the return, what is the culmination of this practice?
What's the payoff?
Yeah, what awaits us on the other side? Because shloka 6.27 outlines a very specific physiological and spiritual state that emerges after all this repetitive labor.
It does. The verse states that supreme bliss, and the Sanskrit term used here is sukham uttamam.
Sukham uttamam.
Supreme bliss comes to the yogi whose mind is completely tranquil and whose passions are quieted.
Okay.
The specific terminology for this quieting of passions is shantarajasa. And the verse concludes by stating that this individual becomes free from sin and becomes one with Brahman, which is the ultimate reality.
Sukham uttamam, supreme bliss. It is an incredibly evocative phrase, but I want to dissect the prerequisite condition first. Shantarajasa, the quieting of passions.
It's vital to understand that part.
How does this specifically connect to the mechanics of the catch and release we just talked about?
To understand that, we must deeply understand the concept of rajas.
Rajas.
In Vedic philosophy, the material world is composed of three gunas, or fundamental qualities. Rajas is the quality of kinetic energy, passion, forward momentum, and frantic activity.
So it's the chaotic energy.
Yes, it is the engine driving the Chancham mind we discussed earlier. It is the raw fuel for that endless scanning radar.
So basically, it is the physiological hum of modern existence.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Consider the sheer thermodynamic cost of maintaining rajas in a typical day for a modern person.
It's exhausting.
You are burning massive amounts of cognitive energy just running simulations of arguments in the shower.
Guilty.
You are spending metabolic resources constantly anticipating the next email. The dopamine loop of the attention economy, the endless scrolling, the constant seeking of novelty, that is basically an industrial-scale exploitation of rajas.
So we are a society suffering from profound systemic fatigue because we are redlining the engine of frantic energy from the literal moment we wake up.
Exactly. We wake up and immediately rev the engine to the max.
So what verse 27 reveals then is that the repetitive practice of the gentle return is basically a mechanism for heat dissipation.
That's a great way to look at it.
Like every time I catch the mind running an anxiety simulation and I calmly say, it has wandered, and pull the attention back to the present, I am actively starving the engine of its fuel. I am removing a log from the fire of rajas.
You're deliberately lowering the kinetic temperature of your nervous system.
Wow.
Over time, through thousands of gentle corrections, that frantic, energetic state is finally quieted. This is the achievement of Shantarajasa. The system just cools down.
And it cools down because we stopped fighting it.
Exactly. And it is only in that cooled, tranquil state that the text promises the emergence of Sukham Uttamam, supreme bliss.
You know, the nature of this promised bliss is arguably the most radical proposition in the entire text, especially when you contrast it with our modern definition of joy.
Oh, our modern definition is entirely different.
Because the global economy is fundamentally structured around selling us outsourced bliss.
Consumable bliss.
Right. Every billboard you see, every targeted ad on your feed is a promise that if we simply acquire the correct external input, we will achieve happiness.
Buy this supplement to feel focused.
Lease this car to feel successful. Book this vacation to an island to finally feel peace. Joy is framed entirely as a transaction.
It is a totally consumer model of consciousness. Bliss is a commodity to be acquired, and they make sure its half-life is intentionally short, so you have to acquire it again and again.
But Sukham Uttamam requires absolutely zero external input. It operates entirely outside the supply chain.
Completely outside.
It demands no screen, no algorithm, no purchase. It doesn't even require external validation. Like, you don't need an audience to witness it or like it on social media. It is entirely self-generated and self-contained.
It is the inherent default state of the self once the distortion of rajas is finally removed.
So it's always there underneath.
Yes. To use an analogy from physics, consider a superconductor.
Okay, physics. Let's go.
Under normal conditions, an electrical current passing through a standard wire encounters resistance. It generates heat, it loses energy, it's inefficient.
You're right.
That resistance is rajas. But when a specific material is cooled below a critical threshold, when it achieves shantarajase, all electrical resistance simply vanishes.
Just disappears.
The current flows perfectly, infinitely, without losing any energy to heat. The energy hasn't disappeared. It has just achieved a state of perfect, frictionless flow.
That is a staggering way to visualize it. So supreme bliss isn't the cessation of experience.
No, not at all.
It is the cessation of the friction that distorts the experience.
Exactly.
The modern attention economy relies completely on our internal friction. It literally monetizes our
They
restlessness.
need us to be restless.
Right, because a distracted, anxious mind is highly profitable. It clicks the clickbait, it buys the impulse item to soothe the anxiety, it doom scrolls to escape the cognitive load.
It's a perfect consumer.
But a mind that has cooled its own resistance through tender discipline, a mind that generates its own self-contained superconductor bliss,
That mind is dangerous to the economy.
that mind has completely opted out of the transaction. It is an act of profound rebellion to just sit there and be happy without buying anything.
And that is the essence of becoming one with Brahman. You achieve total sovereignty. You are no longer violently tossed by the external turbulence of the market or the internal turbulence of your own limbic system.
You are anchored.
You have located the still point, not by building some rigid fortress to keep the world out, but by continuously gently calibrating your internal state until the resistance just drops to zero.
Let's ground that superconductor state in a mundane reality for a second, because when people hear the phrase tranquil mind, the cultural trope is always like a monk staring blankly at a cave wall, completely dissociated from the world.
Like they're just dead inside.
Right, a kind of lobotomized apathy.
But that is the exact opposite of the state being described in the text. The quieting of frantic passion does not extinguish your capacity to feel. It actually clarifies it.
How does it clarify it?
Well, think about it. When your mind is dominated by rajas, you are rarely actually experiencing the present moment. If you are eating dinner with your family, but your mind is running a simulation about a project deadline tomorrow, you aren't actually tasting the food.
No, you're just chewing.
Right. You aren't hearing the nuance in your partner's voice. You are projecting the internal storm of your anxiety over the external reality. You are experiencing the friction, not the life itself.
But if I deploy the catch and release, if I gently guide the attention back from the deadline to the dinner table, the resistance drops.
And suddenly the bandwidth frees up.
Exactly. The bandwidth that was being consumed by the anxiety simulation is suddenly available to actually process the sensory data of the meal.
You taste the food.
The bliss isn't some mystical glowing aura. It is just the startling, hyper-real clarity of simply being present in your own life without the static interference of your own worry.
Which is the only domain where truth actually exists.
Right, the present.
The past is just a memory trace. The future is a predictive simulation. Reality only ever unfolds in the immediate present. So by constantly returning the mind to the present, you are anchoring your consciousness in the only place where the absolute can actually be experienced.
Man, this has been a remarkably dense journey through a text that feels as though it was engineered specifically to diagnose the malaise of our hyper-connected present. Let's kind of pull the architectural blueprints together for a final overview for everyone listening.
I think the foundational step we covered is the total acceptance of the biological reality.
Right. The mind is Chanasam and Astaram. It is a restless, unsteady scanning mechanism by default.
And we identified that major cognitive trap of the commitment fallacy.
Expecting the frictionless glide.
Yes. We expect the execution of a task to be as frictionless as the intention, and when the mind inevitably wanders, we trigger a secondary stress response by labeling ourselves as failures.
And to dismantle that toxic cycle, we deploy the metaphor of the epic tale. We abandon the hostility of brute force and adopt the tender discipline of a parent guiding a toddler's attention.
We recognize that the distraction is not malicious. It is simply the limbic system reacting to stimuli.
And we operationalize this through the daily moment-to-moment practice of catch and release. The cognitive circuit breaker. It has wandered again.
That effect labeling separates the observing self from the restless mind,
Allowing us to redirect attention without triggering that awful amygdala hijack.
which fundamentally redefines our metric for victory. We abandon the impossible idol of unbroken flow state.
Thank goodness.
We recognize that the repetitive, unglamorous labor of returning the attention, the calculation of the error, and the adjustment of the weight is the actual practice of yoga.
And by committing to this algorithmic labor, we starve the frantic engine of rajas.
Yeah.
We cool the system down until the resistance completely vanishes, opening the door to sukham uttamam, a self-generated, frictionless bliss that renders the external transactions of the attention economy entirely obsolete.
The progression really is clear, it's rigorous, and it is completely accessible to anyone, regardless of their environment.
So the direct application for your life today requires absolutely no special equipment. You don't need a meditation cushion. You don't need a silent room.
You don't need anything.
As you navigate your inbox, your commute, or your conversations today, just drop the demand for mechanical perfection. Expect the mind to drift. And when it does, utilize the circuit breaker. Smile internally, observe the drift, say, it has wandered again, and execute the gentle return. You are the sky. The distraction is just weather.
I want to offer a final framework to consider as you step back into your day, one that basically reframes this entire struggle.
I love a reframe.
We have established that the architecture of this discipline is built entirely upon the act of the return. The strength of the neural network is completely reliant on calculating the error.
The back propagation literally requires the wandering.
Precisely. Therefore, consider the implication for your daily frustrations. The modern distractions, the phantom phone buzzes, the sudden spikes of anxiety, the looping memories of past arguments.
We view all of those as the enemies of our peace.
We view them as the obstacles preventing our enlightenment. But if the practice only exists in the act of returning, then these distractions are not the obstacles.
Wait, really?
They are the essential weights we must lift to build the muscle. Without the frantic chanshalam nature of the mind, the practice of yoga would be completely impossible.
So the distraction is the necessary condition for the discipline to emerge. The error is the exact material required for the correction. The murky, chaotic reality of our internal landscape isn't a mess we have to clean up before we can find peace. It is the raw fuel for the engine of our own clarity. That is profound. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Execute the return, and we will see you next time.